This is life inside the walls for the New York State Correction Officer. A closed-in world of cement and steel where kindness is taken for weakness and fear can kill. A world that can turn deadly violent at any moment. Every day, 24 hours a day, 20,000 highly trained men and women go inside the walls to take care, custody, and control of New York State's worst criminal offenders. Together, they form a human barrier between us and 70,000 convicted felons.
A correction officer has to have many skills, and those skills have to come into play from the moment they walk into a facility to the time they leave.
And you remember things from the training and you know what you're supposed to do in certain situations. But what's it going to be like when there's inmates standing around?
Just the experience of going inside the walls for the first time leaves a lasting impression.
When I walked in and I had the gate closed behind me, I think that was one of the scariest moments of my life.
And I remember one priest, when he went through the third set of gates, he literally froze and couldn't go any further. He had to leave.
There's no guarantee you're going home every day when you come into this place. There's no guarantee.
Life inside the walls for a correction officer begins at the Training Academy in Albany, New York, where new recruits will spend 2 months learning the skills required to deal effectively with an increasingly violent inmate population.
Those skills involve interaction on a big scale with inmates, being able to move them from one place to another, being able to assist them in their day-to-day programs.
Then even when you get out, you go through another 4 or 5 weeks of training.
But you can never get training for everything that happens here.
New York State correctional facilities house some of the most dangerous criminals on earth.
The type of crime basically runs the whole gamut, from murder to robbery to rape to burglary.
Many of them are multiple convicted felons, at least one prior felony conviction, and you got a rap sheet as long as your arm.
You got rapists, you got murderers, you got child molesters, you got embezzlers, you got bank robbers.
I've met murderers that have slaughtered people in gang killings.
A lot of these people have nothing to lose. If a riot goes down and they kill an officer, they're already in jail for the rest of their life.
The common misconception is that once they're taken out of society and they come into prison, they're locked up, they're in a cell 24 hours a day, where that's not true.
Where inmates go to school, they go to work, they work in industry, they work in laundry, hospital, they're going to recreation, they're going to the mess hall.
The correction officer's responsibilities place them in constant daily contact with violent felons.
Without the correction officer to guide, instruct, to take care, custody, and control of the inmates, there is complete anarchy.
The first and foremost role of a correction officer is control.
The control part of it would be the movement within the facility, making sure that the inmates are going where they're supposed to be going at the time they're supposed to be going, and being there and doing the things that they're supposed to be doing.
During our custody, we have to make sure that they're following the guidelines that are put out by the Department of Corrections.
We're responsible for taking care of them. We must make sure that they are fed, that they're clothed, that their illnesses are taken care of, and that they're safe from each other as well.
There are far more inmates in a correctional facility than there are correction officers.
In many of our facilities, a correction officer is working in a dormitory with 60 or 90 inmates.
It was incredible. I mean, you would have literally 500 to 600, 700 inmates walking down a corridor at one time with maybe 6 or 7 officers.
You go into a mess hall with 130, 140, 200 inmates, and you're there with maybe another officer.
Violence among inmates is a daily threat.
Not until you actually see it yourself firsthand do you realize to what extremes these inmates go to hurt and assault one another.
We have had inmates kill other inmates. We've had some horrible fights. We've seen inmates slash other inmates wide open.
All I could see was the lights coming off the shanks. They're all stabbing these guys.
A two-man fight can escalate into a full-blown riot in a matter of minutes.
The quiet cell block could turn any moment. A mess hall could turn, a yard could turn, from very quiet, easygoing to a fight, from a two-man fight to a large fight.
We came through the group. We all lined up like a human fence to stop the other inmates from killing the other gentleman.
When inmates attack one another, the correction officer is required to contain and control the incident, usually by putting himself between two or more armed assailants.
Part of their responsibility and their duty is to provide protective custody, if you will, to inmates.
You have two inmates stabbing each other, literally to death. The other inmates don't break it up. They don't come to rescue.
Our responses are level 1s, level 2s, and level 3s. A level 1 would be inmate fighting an inmate. A level 2 would be an officer is now involved in the fight, and a level 3 would be officers are down. Get there as fast as you possibly can.
So now you run into this area thinking, oh my God, what is this? You know, our officer's hurt. And that's playing on your mind. Even after 18 years, it's scary.
Officers involved, officers involved.
And one of the inmates that was really stabbed, he was bleeding quite profusely, and I went to pick him up. Another inmate came running at us, and he had a homemade knife.
Inmates are armed with a deadly variety of cutting and stabbing weapons. Virtually any material that can be sharpened can be made into a weapon.
I call these one of the perfect weapons. All they have to do is cut them down, shape them like a knife.
Plexiglass is becoming a weapon of choice because the metal detectors won't pick it up.
An inmate could take his toothbrush and sharpen the end of it and stab somebody with it. Taking the handle off a mop pail and forming that into a weapon. Disassembling their razor.
You can see that this part with the razor blade on my left hand has been molded or heated into the top of this handle. And inside the sheath is a toilet plunger rod. The rod itself, bent it over, sharpened this end, which you can see. This is a killer. Definitely. This is a stainless steel knife. It's about 12 inches long. They sharpen it either off the cell bars themselves by a grinding motion. The inmates hold it either like this or like this. And if I was to stab somebody with this, it would go into your body 4 to 6 inches.
I had an inmate, I patted him down, and I took his glasses, looked at him, and the earpiece that goes around the ear, I took that off, and the metal part was sharpened right to a point. So he had his weapon disguised as his eyeglasses.
Correction officers are not armed. They do not carry guns.
The public has a bit of a misconception. They think, for example, that the correction officers carry guns. And of course they don't, and with good reason.
You're so outnumbered, it would be ridiculous to carry a weapon.
But you can't carry a gun because another inmate will take it from you too easily and do more damage.
Officers are allowed to carry a wooden baton for use as a defensive weapon. Not all of them choose to do so.
When you go to work as a correction officer, you have no protection. You have your mind, your wit, and a pen to protect yourself.
You need to have a level head in some of the craziest situations.
The weapon of choice for correction officers is their ability to remain calm and think quickly.
You have to be able to use the one weapon that you came into the academy and came into this department with, and that's your mind and your ability to talk.
Talking to inmates in a way that is clear-cut, fair, and decisive is the best way for a correction officer to diffuse a difficult situation.
A good officer will recognize that if he's fair and clear with his instructions, that most of the inmates will follow.
If you're able to quell or stabilize an unstable situation, without having to use force, you're going home in one piece.
Correction officers are trained in firefighting and emergency medical techniques, as well as civil, penal, and constitutional law. But in the end, it's human relations skills tempered with compassion that make a correction officer effective.
You're a counselor, you're a teacher, you try to have an ear for what's going on in here and listen to what the inmates have to say about what's going on with them.
Well, you've got to have good communication skills. Working with completely uneducated people that have gotten nothing but kicked all their lives.
I've bumped into many ex-inmates, ex-offenders over the years who've related to me that the most important person in their life was a correction officer.
The inmate population has changed in recent years, making the correction officer's job more difficult.
A lot of our inmates are on mental medication. They'll be sitting quiet 1 minute, the next minute, all heck let loose.
We have inmates who are schizophrenic, paranoid, suicidal, who are walking the corridors of our jails every day.
So there are more than twice as many psychotic people in prisons in this country than there are in mental hospitals.
Gangs have become a problem, bringing younger, more violent inmates into the prison system.
What you see in the facilities is kind of a direct reflection of what is occurring in the streets.
We have problems with the Bloods, Crips, Latin Kings, Nieta.
They're less disciplined. They're not used to obeying authority. They've been running wild all their life. The older inmates, they'll come to me and say, I don't want to be here anymore. This place is crazy.
The bigger they are, the more control they have. They think they have control of the jail.
When inmates are thinking of one mind with the intent to cause some sort of a disruption, we really face the potential of losing control of that facility.
Inmates use their own body fluids and feces as a potentially deadly weapon in a form of assault called dousing or throwing.
When you're walking down a gallery and all of a sudden you get hit in the face and into your mouth with excrement, it really shakes you.
In my first year at Greenhaven, it happened to me twice. You feel terrible, you feel degraded.
Well, there is a new law in effect now that if they throw urine, feces, or bodily fluids,
thank God for the law,
felony, they can be charged, found guilty, it'd be an added sentence on to the one that they're already doing.
Not knowing if the inmate has AIDS, hepatitis, TB, or other communicable disease adds to the fear and revulsion an officer feels.
You know, that rests in the back of your mind. I have to go home to my family now. Am I going to expose my wife and my kids, my friends?
The disease factor. That's really an area that should scare the hell out of wives.
TB was a major problem in our system back about 1990-91, often HIV connected.
When I was bitten by an inmate, he grabbed my arm, bit into my forearm. That resulted in me going for HIV testing.
I try to shower as soon as I get home. I constantly wash my hands here.
We've been able to cut back on TB in our system by about 90% in the last 8 years.
So much of a correction officer's daily success and survival depends on stopping trouble before it starts. That vigilance is critical.
Has to be a person who never is not observing what's going on. It's a lot of pressure for a correction officer to be doing this consistently and constantly.
And you'll hear something, and you're not even in the area, and you know exactly what that noise is, whether it be a cart, a falling broom, anything. You become so cued to your area.
The way an inmate's walking could be an indication that he could be potentially concealing contraband. The way inmates group together in a recreation yard or in a corridor or in a mess hall could also be an indication of a problem.
Inmates work just as hard to find ways to catch an officer off guard. They taunt, con, and manipulate, looking for any advantage they can gain.
They can call you anything and everything they want to. They can say things about your family. They can tell you when they get out they're going to rape your wife.
They're going to sit and plan. They're going to play their games until they get something that they think they can use on the officer.
They pick up our little faults, what we don't do right, and then they come after you.
And every correction officer lives with the knowledge that no matter how watchful or how prepared he is, the unpredictable can always occur.
regardless of how well things are running today or even this minute, that the very next minute or tomorrow could bring a serious problem.
When the officers take this job, they know that they'll be susceptible to unprovoked acts of violence.
When the inmate pushed down on the baton with his left hand, struck me with his right hand, which held a razor blade. I realized that he had struck an artery. I watched the blood spurt forcefully into my hand, across my face, and down my shirt.
It's a hard job for a correction officer to leave behind at the end of his day. There's no one he can talk to about it who understands, except for fellow officers. Wives, girlfriends, husbands, friends can only listen to so much before they tune out, before they have to tune out. The correction officer is left alone with the grim reality of his job. He has nowhere to go. He's in prison.
So much negativity that you have to deal with on a day in and day out basis.
But you have to learn to be able to listen to it, be able to talk about it, and then be able to forget about it. If you don't, you would go insane.
But it's just over time. It's 12 years of stress, of just being in the element, and it's affected my life. I'm not the same person I was when I started this job.
Most officers choose to bear the burden alone rather than bring it home to their families.
If you bring your job home with you, then my feeling is you don't have a home life.
What more can be said? 20,000 men and women do this every day. They enter a world populated completely by criminals, a violent world, an unpredictable world, an often disgusting world. And yet in this world, the New York State Correction Officer maintains the professionalism required to take care, control, and custody of 70,000 convicted felons. They are proud of who they are. They take pride in what they do.
The officers who work for the New York State Corrections are absolutely the best in the country.
It takes a very unique kind of person to be able to walk into one of the jails day after day and do the job that they do. You're looking at a person who gets up and goes to work with the idea that they might not come back out.